Welcome to Perimenopause Hell. This video is about the new series that's come out called Sex, Myths and the Menopause, which is presented by Davina McCall. And she talks about menopause, her experience of menopause, and the medicines that she takes for it. So before we go any further, I'd just like to say many of us really love and admire Davina, and I used to like watching her on Big Brother. So, it's really nice to see Davina doing this and bringing attention to perimenopause. So the positives, of course, it's great to see anything about menopause and perimenopause mentioned on the TV. Vaginal atrophy was discussed, and the safety of the creams, which is one of the things I find really important in the group, is telling women about vaginal atrophy and making sure they are treating it if they seem to have it. They also mentioned premature ovarian failure and that menopause can happen at any age. That's something else that's also really important to understand. The opinion of medical doctors was sought, and a variety of women were interviewed, although they were really just clips and they were quite short. I felt I would like to have seen more of those interviews. One of the problems for me, though, is the way that the show dealt with natural products. Davina's verdict was, and it took her all of 2 minutes to cover natural products, that natural products just don't work. But having said that, there was no interview with a herbalist or any alternative practitioners. There was no review of any of the studies that demonstrate the effectiveness of phytoestrogens like black cohosh, maca, soy isoflavones, red clover, motherwort, or any of the other traditional remedies. And those studies do exist, by the way. And there weren't any interviews with women that successfully use anything other than HRT at all. So there were no interviews with women who used natural products. There were no interviews with women using medicines that aren't hormonal, like antidepressants, gabapentin, all those kind of options. And there are women who do take those and are very happy with them. That is absolutely the truth. We've got videos on this YouTube channel that quote from reviews that women have left about those medicines, and actually women in our Facebook group do leave comments that are positive about those medicines too. Antidepressants are a very useful treatment modality, and in general, this program made it seem like if a doctor was offering you antidepressants, then they were fobbing you off, and it was the wrong thing to prescribe because they were only for treating depression. But in fact, a lot of the worst symptoms of perimenopause are anxiety and depression, and antidepressants treat those problems more reliably than HRT. So that segment of all 2 minutes ended with Davina sniggering and making a joke about the Lady Care magnet, and I agree that the Lady Care magnet is a waste of money, but grouping that together with all of the other natural remedies is borderline unkind, actually. I really thought that was rather rude and dismissive. This lady on the right of the screen is the famous American herbalist Susan Weed, who's written books about menopause, and there's quite a large body of work about what herbs work to alleviate symptoms. Just quickly to cover some of the reasons why natural treatments fail. Many women think it's convenient to use these products that are branded and packaged like Menopause and Estroven and Amberon and things like that. But women are also lacking in a great understanding of how these different herbs work, and not to their detriment, they are difficult to understand. We have learning resources about those things on our YouTube and in our group, so you can learn. It might take you 30 minutes to really grasp it. The failure to use an adequate quantity of the phytoestrogens is another aspect of this. because some women inherently distrust alternative remedies, they feel uncomfortable about taking enough of the product to actually get it to work. And there is an element of lack of convenience. If you're going to make your own infusions, for example, that is definitely not the most convenient way. But even if you're taking supplements that come in capsules, you might be taking quite a lot of those 3 times a day. It seems like a lot, and it's not the most convenient regimen. So, okay, we've dealt with that. But my view is that if you do that properly, it does work. Before we continue, it's very important for you to understand this. I am not against HRT. There are times when HRT is definitely the best treatment. There are circumstances like osteoporosis and other conditions that make it the best option some of the time. But we do need to acknowledge the risks, and we need to be realistic about it. HRT is not perfect. The HRT will never be the same as your own hormones were. And there are other things to try first, and I think it's for the best that you try other things first. So the thing that really, really annoyed me about this program was the complete cheerleading for HRT that went on throughout it. And when I talk about cheerleading, I mean it was completely unbalanced in terms of looking at other treatments and things that other women found to be successful and the dangers of HRT. And there were things like when premature ovarian failure was mentioned, the use of HRT being necessary was conflated with the use in older women. But women who suffer from premature ovarian failure are supposed to take HRT up to the average natural age of menopause, which is around 51 in the UK and America. So basically, the use of HRT for POF is nowhere near the same as women of natural menopause age using it. Of course, once again, there were the assumptions that other medicines don't work, and there weren't any interviews with anyone who found them useful. So it was a very biased method of reporting. Also, there was the assumption that all women experience distressing symptoms and need HRT. And there was kind of almost like a feminist kind of, we must fight for our HRT and all women must be able to have it kind of thing. And I don't think that's the case at all. The restriction on HRT prescriptions have been placed due to the research about them. So unfortunately, I have found this quite irritating. HRT was basically portrayed as the only successful therapy. Concerns about the safety of HRT were dismissed. There wasn't any discussion at all about women who experience side effects from HRT, and there are some really serious ones, so that was really, once again, I just found it really annoying, biased, and unreasonable. There wasn't any discussion at all about women who find that HRT doesn't help with libido or depression or anxiety or weight gain and all the things that HRT doesn't usually actually help with. Many women who go on HRT for their mental health during perimenopause find that they need to use an antidepressant as well as HRT. So, really, trying the antidepressant first in case they don't need the HRT is by far the best idea. These are screenshots from the NHS website that lists the side effects of HRT. So you can stop the video and look at these. So the side effects of estrogen are everything from bloating, breast tenderness, leg cramps, headaches, indigestion, and vaginal bleeding. If you are on too high a level of estrogen, you will get breakthrough bleeding and the lining of your womb will get too thick. Even if you're taking progesterone, you may not be taking a big enough dose of progesterone to ensure that that doesn't happen. The side effects of progesterone are often what make taking HRT very, very difficult for some women. I'm one of them. I have in the past taken HRT for a total of 3 years, and the progesterone part of it was very, very difficult to deal with. Although people do say that the bioidentical progesterone is much better for side effects, there isn't really anything other than anecdotal evidence, which means that women say it's not as bad. There's no research to say for sure it's not as bad. And I know through the group plenty of women that find the bioidentical progesterones like prometrium and utrogestin every bit as bad in terms of side effects. So the side effects of progesterone are breast tenderness, mood swings, depression, acne, tummy pain, back pain, all sorts of things. But it's often the moods that women find most difficult. It's like PMS on steroids. Really, for me, I was extremely depressed whenever I had to take Provera. I absolutely hated it. I wasn't myself at all. The program really failed to take the WHI study that showed that there was a risk of breast cancer seriously. The WHI study was a very large one. It was 27,347 women of various ages. It showed an increase in breast cancer and heart disease of a significant amount that can't really be ignored. Okay, so a common criticism of this study is that the type of estrogen used is now regarded as being quite old fashioned. It was done with conjugated estrogens, but I hate to say this, but estrogen is estrogen, whether it is bioidentical or synthetic or conjugated or whatever it is. Basically, the risk is coming from the estrogen. So let's not pretend that there isn't a risk, because there is a risk. It has been proven demonstrably by this study. No matter how many times anyone might want to say that there isn't a risk, plainly there is. More studies are needed. I think sometimes the risk is very exaggerated by doctors who don't want to prescribe it because they're worried about their legal liability if somebody sues them. But basically, we do need to acknowledge we can't ignore a study of this magnitude. I have the statistics on the screen at the moment from an article written by GP Ginny Mansberg, who is Australian, and she says that the WHI study showed that for every 10,000 women using HRT, there were 8 extra cases of breast cancer, compared to the women who weren't taking it. For every 10,000, there was 30 cases of breast cancer, which meant in the HRT arm, there were 38 cases per 10,000 women. It wasn't explained quite that way in Davina's program, and it seemed to somehow make out that there were less cases of cancer. She did say something about there being less cases in the estrogen-only arm, but unfortunately, all women who still have a uterus have to take progesterone. So, it's kind of a moot point, really. So, what Ginny Mansberg said, and she is very pro HRT, is that in this study, the risk of breast cancer from HRT was only slightly higher than the risk of drinking 1 glass of wine a night, but less than the risk of drinking 2 glasses of wine a night. So this gives you an idea of how serious the risk is. I think you have to make your own decisions, and this is why trying something else first is probably a good idea. I don't think HRT should be banned. I just think that women have to accept there's a risk and make that decision for themselves whether or not it's a risk worth taking. The thing that really concerned me the most about this show is the doctors that were used in it. Both of these doctors operate private practices in the UK. Dr. Nick Panay has a Harley Street office, and he's also listed as a consultant at a Chelsea clinic called the Women's Wellness Centre. He does also work for the NHS. But you can see from this listing here that I got from their website, the fees that are charged for consulting a gynecologist, and even the telephone consultation is £150. They will also charge for their prescriptions and so on as well. They charge for the cost of writing the prescription. That doesn't actually cover any of the products either. So this is Dr. Louise Newson, and she has a rapidly expanding private practice in the UK, registered with Companies House as Newson Health Limited. She is a GP with a specialism in menopause, and she has a very good bedside manner. By this, I would tend to describe her as the ideal doctor for any menopausal woman. She seems to be very, very caring, and she's basically always happy to prescribe HRT for somebody who needs it. However, the fees at Dr. Newson's clinic are, as you can see, you can always stop this video and look at them yourself. A consultation will set you back £275. The cost for writing out the prescription is £35. Follow-up appointments are also charged for. The follow-up appointments here are £215. If you go to the section about the HRT costs themselves, she states that the prices of the product start at around £14 per item, and testosterone is more expensive at £80 for a tube of cream that lasts about 3 or 4 months. And this doesn't seem particularly accurate to me, because if you notice, I looked up a very common product that's used, Everil Sequi patches, and one box of 8 patches is £32. So that's quite a difference than £14. So I'm not quite sure what she means by that. This is the same Dr. Newson that is quoted in a Guardian article, which says, if estrogen can save women from the worst of COVID, they should be given it. Now, to me, knowing the risk of breast cancer, do you think that's a sensible option, that we're taking it for COVID? And she says, quote from the Guardian article, that the symptoms of long COVID are likely to be related to low estrogen and testosterone levels, and so consideration should be given to giving these women HRT. I find that just the most absolutely bonkers idea that I've heard of with relation to COVID, I'm afraid. So sorry about that, Dr. Newson, but, no, sorry. The last thing I'm going to say is I looked up Davina McCall, and I found an article where she discusses her HRT regimen. She takes, I think it was it's Estradot. It says they're a HRT patch, and she takes the dose that's 100 micrograms, I assume. That's the strongest patch that Estradot comes in. And Dr. Newson actually has her taking a gel, an estrogen gel, in addition to this very high dosed patch. So make of that what you will. taking too much estrogen is not a good idea. Even if you're on HRT, you need to take the lowest dose possible for alleviating your symptoms. The idea of somebody being on a very high dose patch and using an estrogen gel as well, to me, sounds a bit over the top. I would be extremely worried if somebody in my group told me that they were on that kind of arrangement. I'd be worried that they were going to develop endometrial hyperplasia, which is a thickening of the lining of the uterus, and that puts you at risk for cancer of the uterus. I know, of course, that Davina takes a progesterone, which is supposed to protect your uterus, but the ratio of the progesterone to the estrogen needs to be correct. You can't have too much estrogen going on, or you will run into problems. So I am a bit concerned about Davina in this respect, and I'm also concerned that Dr. Louise Newson appears to be her doctor, which just seems to be a bit of a conflict of interest if you're doing a program about menopause that is meant to be impartial. So that's the end of my video answering and reviewing Davina's program. This is just the first of 4 episodes, so I hope some of these things that I've picked up on are dealt with in the next 3 episodes. And really, that's the end. If you found this discussion interesting, then please like and subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments. And the link to our group is in the description box below. Cheerio, and thanks for listening.